The gown weighed on Evelyn Hartman like a chain. Layers of ivory silk fell heavy against her slender frame, the fabric whispering with every reluctant movement. In the ornate mirror before her, she hardly recognized the pale young woman staring back, lips pressed tight, shoulders rigid, eyes wide with dread beneath a veil that shimmered like a spider's web. "Stand up straight." Margaret Hartman barked from across the bridal suite. Her voice carried the edge of command, sharpened by years of disappointment. "You look like a servant waiting for punishment, not a bride. Do you want the entire Drake family to know what a wretched job you've done replacing your sister?" Evelyn's fingers trembled as they brushed the bodice. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. The words sat bitter on her tongue, unspoken, because she already knew what her mother would say if she dared protest. "You should be grateful," Margaret continued, pacing the plush carpet, her heels clicking with impatient rhythm. "Grateful that you are not being thrown out onto the street. Do you think any man would willingly look twice at you? Without this marriage, you'd have nothing, no security, no future. Your sister was chosen, and now you will do your duty in her place. Her place." The phrase echoed like a curse. Charlotte had vanished the night before, fleeing with the man she claimed to love, leaving Evelyn with the aftermath of betrayal. Margaret hadn't wept, hadn't begged. She had simply turned her calculating gaze onto her youngest daughter and decreed, "You will go in her stead. You will not shame this family now." Standing in the golden light of the bridal chamber, Evelyn felt the walls close in. "Smile," Margaret ordered, snapping open a velvet box to reveal the Drake heirloom necklace, diamonds glittering like cold stars. "Do not let them see your weakness. This marriage is our salvation, and you will not ruin it with your trembling lips." Evelyn's throat ached. She whispered, "It isn't fair." Margaret froze, her eyes narrowing. "Fair? You dare speak of fairness? Life has never been fair to us, Evelyn. Your father left us with debts and disgrace. I clawed us back from ruin, and this marriage is the reward for my sacrifices. Do not pretend you deserve better. Charlotte was meant to marry him, but she was foolish, selfish. So now you must prove yourself useful at last." Each word landed like a lash. Evelyn closed her eyes, willing herself not to cry. She thought of Charlotte, glamorous, adored, always favored. Evelyn had been the quiet one, the shadow who listened more than she spoke, who was overlooked in every family portrait. And now she was asked to become Charlotte, to wear her smile, to carry her future. A knock sounded at the door. "5 minutes, Mrs. Hartman," a voice called. Margaret clasped the necklace around Evelyn's neck, her fingers rough. "There," she said with a satisfied nod. "Now you almost look the part. Remember, he cannot see you. He will not know the difference." The words cut deeper than comfort. Lucian Drake was blind, yes, but from everything Evelyn had read in the endless articles about him, he was no fool. A man who had built an empire of technology even after losing his sight would not be so easily deceived. Margaret smoothed Evelyn's veil one last time, her touch devoid of tenderness. "Keep your voice steady, keep your head bowed, and say nothing that might betray you. If you ruin this, Evelyn, you ruin us all." The door opened, and a coordinator ushered them toward the grand ballroom. Evelyn's legs moved as if bound by invisible cords, her steps reluctant. Dragging against the weight of expectation, the ceremony unfolded in a blur of opulence. Chandeliers spilled light over rows of silk-draped chairs, where New York's elite whispered behind jeweled hands. The scent of roses hung thick in the air, mingling with the nervous thrum of violins. Reporters hovered near the back, cameras flashing, eager to capture every detail of the union between the Hartman family and the enigmatic Lucian Drake. Evelyn walked the aisle with her mother's voice hissing in her ear. "Smile, bow your head. Be silent at the altar." Lucian stood waiting, tall, broad-shouldered, his black suit immaculate, his sightless eyes fixed forward. His presence commanded the room, a paradox of vulnerability and authority. When she reached him, he turned slightly, as though listening beyond the music. His hand reached out, steady and unyielding, and Evelyn placed her trembling fingers into his palm. The contact startled her. His hand was warm, firm, and unshakably confident. He closed his fingers around hers, and though his gaze did not meet hers, she felt suddenly pinned beneath it. "You're trembling," he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Are you afraid, Charlotte?" Her breath caught. The name hung like a mask between them. She forced herself to nod, whispering no. His thumb brushed lightly against her knuckles, a movement so subtle she wondered if it had been deliberate. Then he said something that hollowed her chest. "I may be blind, but I will see you, one way or another." The words lingered, as the officiant began to speak, as vows were recited, as rings slid onto fingers. Evelyn repeated the promises, in a voice that wavered, each syllable carrying the weight of deception. When it was done, when applause rose like a wave around them, Lucien turned his face toward her. Though his eyes revealed nothing, Evelyn felt as though he pierced through every layer of pretense she wore. The kiss was brief, ceremonial, his lips barely brushing hers. Yet even in that moment, Evelyn sensed something unnerving. He knew. He had known from the moment she placed her hand in his, and she, trapped in her sister's gown, shackled by her mother's will, could only stand beside him and wonder how long the charade could last. The limousine pulled away, leaving Evelyn Hartman standing before the wrought iron gates of the Drake estate. The sheer scale of the mansion loomed against the dusk, its stone facade catching the last amber threads of sunlight. Ivy curled along its high walls, shadows pooling in every crevice, and windows glowed faintly like watchful eyes. The air smelled of autumn leaves and distant rain, yet the weight pressing on Evelyn's chest came not from the season, but from the life she had been thrust into. The gates opened without a sound. Somewhere, hidden cameras had already marked her arrival, and soon she found herself walking along a cobblestone path bordered by manicured hedges. Every detail whispered wealth, precision, and restraint. This was no ordinary home. It was a fortress, designed not only to impress, but to shield. The heavy oak doors parted, and Evelyn stepped inside. Marble floors stretched beneath her heels, polished until they gleamed. Chandeliers scattered light across portraits of ancestors she did not recognize, men and women with sharp eyes and unforgiving mouths. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the muffled tick of a distant clock. Anna Lopez, the housekeeper, appeared almost at once. Petite but brisk, with graying hair neatly pulled into a bun, she offered a polite nod. "Mrs. Drake," she greeted. The title sent a shiver through Evelyn, foreign, ill-fitting, as though it belonged to another woman. Anna gestured toward the grand staircase. "Mr. Drake is expecting you for dinner. This way, please." Each step up the stairs echoed in Evelyn's bones. The corridor beyond was lined with dark wood panels and tall windows curtained in velvet. She could feel the house judging her, weighing her worth, measuring her against the ghost of Charlotte, against the Drake legacy itself. The dining hall stretched like a gallery, long and solemn. A single table dominated the room, capable of seating 20, yet only 2 places had been set. At the far end, Lucien Drake sat waiting. He rose when she entered, his movements measured, precise. He did not turn his head toward the door immediately. He seemed to listen first, attuned to the shuffle of her steps, the hesitation in her breathing. Only then did he incline his face in her direction. "Charlotte," he said, his baritone voice carrying across the expanse. Evelyn's heart skipped. The name cut against her skin, a reminder of the role she had been forced into. She lowered her gaze, murmuring, "Good evening." Anna guided her to the seat opposite him and quietly withdrew, leaving the cavernous room to its 2 occupants. Dinner was served in courses, the silver domes lifted in silence by invisible staff. Evelyn's appetite had long since vanished, but she forced herself to pick at the delicate portions, her fork trembling against porcelain. Lucian did not eat at once. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as though assessing something only he could sense. His eyes, clouded, yet piercing, settled unnervingly in her direction. "You wear a different perfume tonight," he remarked casually. Evelyn froze, her fork halfway to her lips. "Do I?" she whispered. "Yes." He smiled faintly, though it carried no warmth. "Charlotte favored jasmine. This is something else, lavender, perhaps." Evelyn set her fork down, her palms damp. She had not thought of perfume, had only grabbed the bottle left on her vanity that morning. Her sister's signature scent had been an afterthought. Lucian leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming lightly against the polished wood. Strange, he mused. How quickly one can forget a detail that once seemed indispensable. The silence that followed was unbearable. Evelyn forced a sip of water to steady her voice. "It's been a long day. Perhaps I wasn't paying attention." Perhaps his lips curved in something almost like amusement. Or perhaps I am mistaken. Blind men are prone to error, after all. But the way he said it, steady and deliberate, told her he was not mistaken at all. The courses continued. Soup, roasted pheasant, vegetables carved with precision. Evelyn tasted none of it. Lucian, in contrast, ate unhurriedly, each gesture efficient, practiced. He needed no guidance. His hands moved, with the assurance of long habit. Knife and fork, navigating as though he saw every angle. When dessert was set before them, he spoke again, his tone deceptively light. "Tell me, Charlotte, do you recall the first time we met?" Evelyn's mind went blank. Her sister had mentioned nothing of such a meeting, if it had even occurred. Panic surged hot in her chest. "Aye," she faltered. Lucian leaned forward, folding his hands neatly atop the tablecloth. "It was 3 years ago, at the winter gala. You wore a sapphire gown. You spoke of your father's passion for music, how he played Chopin on stormy nights. Do you remember?" Her lips parted, but no words emerged. Her father had never touched a piano in his life. Lucian's smile returned, sharper this time. Curious. One would think such a memory would be unforgettable. Her throat tightened. She forced herself to nod, hoping the gesture would suffice. But he could not see it. He tilted his head, listening, always listening. "Silence speaks louder than denial," he murmured. Evelyn gripped her napkin until her knuckles whitened. She had been in this house less than an hour, and already the threads of her disguise were unraveling. At last, Lucian pushed his chair back. The scrape of wood against marble echoed. He rose to his full height, imposing even in stillness. "Thank you for dinner," he said, his voice cool but courteous. "You must be tired. Anna will show you to your rooms." Evelyn rose too quickly, nearly toppling her chair. She caught herself, cheeks burning, and offered a stiff nod. Lucian paused. His sightless eyes turned toward her, as though he could see every fracture in her mask. Then, in a voice low enough to brush against her spine, he said, "Rest well. Tomorrow, we begin again." The hallway seemed endless, its shadows stretching like fingers as Evelyn followed Anna toward the guest wing. Her heels clicked softly on the marble, yet every sound echoed too loudly in the cavernous silence. Somewhere behind her, the dining hall door closed with a heavy thud, and Lucian Drake's parting words still haunted her. "Silence speaks louder than denial." Her breath quickened. He knew, perhaps not everything, but enough. And if he kept pressing, if she faltered again, it would only be a matter of time before the truth spilled out. Anna opened a door at the far end of the corridor. "Your rooms, ma'am," she said gently. The title still felt foreign, scraping against Evelyn's ears. Inside, the suite was spacious tall windows draped in velvet, a four-poster bed carved from mahogany, a fireplace already lit. Yet the warmth of the flames did little to thaw the chill lodged in her chest. She stepped inside, her fingers trailing across the bedspread, tracing the embroidery as if searching for something familiar, but nothing belonged to her here. This was Charlotte's world, Charlotte's fate, Charlotte's lie. Anna lingered in the doorway, her eyes soft. She was older than Evelyn had realized, lines etched deep around her mouth, the weariness of decades in service. Still, there was kindness there, a flicker of something maternal that Evelyn had not felt from her own mother in years. "You should try to sleep," Anna advised. "Tomorrow will be full." Evelyn turned, unable to keep the tremor from her voice. "He suspects, doesn't he?" Anna hesitated, then closed the door behind her, stepping fully into the room. "Mr. Drake misses nothing. He has lived too long in darkness not to learn how to see without sight. But suspicion is not the same as certainty." The words offered little comfort. Evelyn pressed her palms together, staring at the fire. "I don't know how long I can keep this up. I'm not my sister. I can't be." Anna's gaze softened. She moved closer, lowering her voice. "Then don't try to be. He will notice the differences no matter how well you act. The only question is whether those differences condemn you or save you." Evelyn looked at her, startled. "Save me?" A faint smile touched Anna's lips. "Mr. Drake is a proud man, but he is not unfeeling. He values truth more than perfection. If you give him kindness, he may forgive deception. But cruelty, that he will never forgive." Evelyn thought of Charlotte, her sharp laugh, her casual disdain for anything less than glamorous. Kindness had never been her sister's gift, perhaps, Evelyn realized with a pang. It was the only card she herself could play. Anna reached for the bedside lamp, dimming the room into a gentler glow. "Rest now," she murmured. "You will need your strength. And remember, Mrs. Drake." She paused, as though weighing her next words carefully. "Sometimes the only way through a lie is to tell a truth of your own." With that, she left, the door clicking softly shut. Evelyn sank onto the bed, her hands twisting in her lap. The gown she still wore constricted her ribs, silk heavy with borrowed fate. She wanted to rip it away, to breathe as herself again. But Margaret's voice still thundered in her skull. "You will not ruin this family." The fire snapped, sparks leaping against the stone hearth. Evelyn buried her face in her hands. The weight of the day pressed down, crushing her chest. Yet beneath the fear was something else, something strange, something she dared not name. Lucian Drake had unsettled her from the moment their hands touched. His confidence, his strange way of knowing, his promise that he would see her all lingered, prickling her skin. He was a stranger, yes, but not a fool. And in some inexplicable way, she felt more visible to him than to anyone else she had ever known. At last, exhaustion claimed her. She laid back against the pillows, eyes drifting shut, the words echoing once more in the darkness. "I don't need eyes to recognize a lie." Morning came with a pale wash of light through the curtains. Evelyn stirred, her dreams fractured and restless. For a moment she forgot where she was, then the velvet canopy above reminded her. The Drake estate. The marriage? The lie. A knock at the door startled her. She sat up quickly, pulling the blanket to her chest. "Breakfast is served," Anna's voice called. Evelyn hesitated before answering. "I'll be down shortly." She dressed in a gown laid out for her, the fabric finer than anything she had ever owned. Every button she fastened tightened the cage around her ribs. She studied her reflection in the mirror, perfect hair, perfect silk, perfect mask. Yet her eyes betrayed her, wide, uncertain, unwilling. The dining hall awaited again, though this time the table held only fruit and coffee. Lucian was already seated, his posture impeccable, his hands folded before him. He did not turn his head when she entered, yet somehow she knew he had marked every detail of her arrival, the shuffle of her steps, the catch of her breath, even the pause at the threshold. "Good morning," he said evenly. "Good morning," she echoed, taking the seat opposite him. He reached for his cup with practiced ease, lifting it without hesitation. Steam curled upward, and he inhaled briefly before sipping. Only then did he speak. His words as calm as if they were discussing the weather. "You lied to me last night." Evelyn's pulse lurched. What do you mean?" Lucian set the cup down with deliberate care. His clouded eyes lifted, fixing her in place, though they saw nothing. "I asked if you remembered the winter gala. You did not answer. But your silence was answer enough." Her mouth went dry. She grasped the edge of the table, searching for words. Lucian leaned slightly forward, his voice lowering, carrying an edge that sliced through the stillness. "I do not need eyes to recognize a lie." The statement landed like a verdict. Evelyn swallowed hard, her heart pounding against her ribs, and yet, strangely, there was no anger in his tone, only certainty, as though he were simply stating a fact of nature. She dropped her gaze, her throat tight. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though whether for the falsehood itself or for the life she had been forced into, she could not tell. Lucian sat back, silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "We will see, Mrs. Drake. We will see." The words chilled her more than fury ever could. Evelyn awoke to sunlight pressing through the velvet curtains, a pale gold that did little to chase the weight from her chest. The mansion was too still, as if its walls conspired to remind her of the lie she lived inside. Yet that morning, as she pulled her hair into a loose braid and tied the sash of her dress, she resolved to triumph, not for herself, then for the man she had been bound to. The kitchen was already alive, with the faint hum of staff. Most barely acknowledged her, trained to invisibility, but Evelyn insisted on brewing the coffee herself. She measured the grounds carefully, the rich aroma rising, filling her lungs with something warm, something grounding. She sliced bread, toasted it, and spread butter that softened instantly against the heat. Simple tasks, but tasks that felt real. When she entered the breakfast room, Lucian was already seated at the head of the small table, reserved for morning meals. He sat straight, the sunlight glancing across his sharp cheekbones, his hands resting on the arms of his chair, his sightless eyes lifted as if he could track her steps. "You're early," he said. Evelyn set the tray before him, her hands steady despite her racing pulse. "I thought you might like something fresh. Coffee, toast." He tilted his head, inhaling, not the staff's usual brew. His fingers traced the rim of the cup, then lifted it with practiced ease. He sipped, and a faint smile touched his lips. "Different, stronger. You made this." She nodded, then remembered he could not see. "Yes." Silence stretched, not hostile, simply observant. "At last," he said. Charlotte never set foot in the kitchen. She thought ovens were for servants. The words pierced. Evelyn lowered her gaze, fighting the urge to explain. Instead, she murmured, "Maybe some things change." Lucian said nothing more. But when he reached for the toast, his expression softened, thoughtful. Later that week, Evelyn found him in the garden. Autumn leaves carpeted the ground, crisp underfoot, and the air smelled faintly of pine. Lucian stood near the fountain, his cane angled against the stone bench. "Would you like a walk?" she asked. He inclined his head. "If you'll be my guide." She slipped her arm through his, tentative at first, then steadier as they moved along the gravel path. She described what she saw: the blaze of crimson maples, the way sunlight fractured through branches, the glint of water where the fountain arced. Her voice grew more animated as she spoke, carried by an unexpected delight in sharing the world with him. Lucian listened quietly, his face turned toward her as though he were memorizing each word. When they paused near a cluster of chrysanthemums, he asked, "What color?" "Yellow," she said. "Bright, almost golden." He reached out, brushing his fingers along the petals, then gave a short nod. "Golden. I can almost see it." The admission tugged at something deep in her chest. She guided him back to the bench, where they sat together. For the first time, Evelyn did not feel like an imposter, but like herself, present and unhidden. Evenings became their quiet ritual. Evelyn would choose a book from the Drake Library, volumes bound in leather, lined neatly across shelves that stretched to the ceiling. She read aloud, her voice steadying with each page. Sometimes poetry, sometimes history, sometimes novels that made her smile at the character's folly. Lucian rarely interrupted, but occasionally he would ask, "How do you picture this scene?" Or "What tone do you hear in that character's voice?" Questions that drew her deeper, that made her feel her thoughts mattered. One night, as the fire crackled low, he stopped her mid-sentence. "You read differently," he said. Her hands tightened on the book. "Differently. Your cadence, softer." Charlotte used to rush, as though her words were burdens to be discarded. "You savor them." Evelyn swallowed hard, afraid her silence would betray her again. But Lucian did not press. He simply leaned back, expression unreadable, and said, "Continue." It was during one of these evenings that Henry Wallace arrived. The lawyer's presence filled the room with the scent of rain-damp wool and leather briefcases. He was tall, silver-haired, with eyes that missed nothing. "Mr. Drake," he greeted, bowing his head slightly. "Forgive the interruption. The contracts are ready for your review." Lucian gestured for him to sit. Evelyn rose to leave, but Lucian's hand lifted slightly, halting her. "Stay," he said. "There is nothing here you may not hear." Henry's gaze flickered to Evelyn, then back to his papers. He spoke in measured tones, outlining acquisitions and partnerships, his words precise. Yet even as he explained, his eyes lingered on Lucian, noting the subtle ease in his posture, the quiet curve at the corner of his mouth. It was not the expression of a man burdened by business, but of one unexpectedly content. When Henry departed, he offered Evelyn a polite nod, but there was curiosity in his eyes, silent question left unspoken. Later that night, as Evelyn extinguished the lamps, Lucian said quietly, "You've changed this house." She turned, startled. Yes." His fingers tapped lightly against the armrest, a rhythm thoughtful and slow. "For years, these halls have been filled only with silence. But now, even your quiet is different. It lingers." Her chest tightened. She wanted to ask what he meant, but fear kept the words caged. Instead, she whispered good night and fled to her room, heart racing with something she could neither name nor deny. The following morning dawned gray, with drizzle whispering against the tall windows of the Drake estate. The house seemed even larger in the dim light, its endless corridors echoing with the hush of rain. Evelyn found herself wandering toward a room she had not yet entered. When Anna identified it as the music room, Evelyn hesitated at the doorframe. Lucian stood near the grand piano, his hand resting lightly on the polished lid. His profile was still composed, but his head tilted slightly, as though listening to something beyond the patter of rain. "I can hear it," he said without turning. His voice was quiet, but resonant, filling the space between them. "The rhythm changes as the drops hit the glass. It isn't noise. It's music, if you listen carefully." Evelyn stepped closer, her palms damp. "Do you play?" "Not anymore." His hand drifted across the lid, fingers tracing the wood as though it were a memory. He did not explain further. Something about the admission felt like a closed door. She longed to ask what had made him stop, but her tongue stalled. Instead, she offered, "Would you like me to read to you again tonight?" Lucian's head tilted. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you might tell me something of yourself. Books are easy. People are harder." Her breath caught. She wrapped her arms around herself, unable to form a reply. He let the silence linger, then with a faint smile that wasn't quite kind, he murmured, "Another time, then." That evening, Evelyn insisted on cooking herself. The staff protested, whispering that Mrs. Drake need not lift a finger, but she brushed them aside. Her hands moved almost automatically roasting chicken, seasoning vegetables, warming bread until its crust cracked with golden crispness. The scent filled the kitchen with something homely, something she hadn't felt since childhood suppers, before her father's. Debts consumed their lives. When she placed the meal before Lucian in the small dining room, his head lifted slightly. "You've taken an interest in domestic things. I thought it might be comforting," she said, smoothing her apron with nervous hands. He raised a fork, tasting slowly. His expression shifted, not surprise, exactly, but contemplation. Then he set the utensil down with deliberate care. "Charlotte hated cooking," he said. His tone was calm, but it carried the weight of judgment. "She once told me it ruined a woman's hands. She would rather starve than slice a vegetable." Evelyn froze. The knife in her own hand suddenly felt too sharp. Lucian's clouded eyes turned toward her, unyielding, though unseeing. His words landed like a hammer. "You are not her." The room fell silent, the rain outside the only witness. Evelyn's chest constricted. 100 excuses swirled on her tongue, but none escaped. Her lips parted, then closed again. And the truth, or at least the absence of denial, hung heavily in the air. Lucian leaned forward, his voice soft but certain. "I don't need eyes to recognize a lie. Your silences, your touch, even the way you breathe, it's all different." Evelyn gripped the edge of the table. "Then why say nothing?" Her voice cracked on the final word. His smile was faint, enigmatic. "Because I want to know who you are. And until you choose to tell me, I will wait." She swallowed hard, every muscle taut. Then she rose abruptly, gathering the dishes to escape the room. Later, in the sanctuary of her chambers, Evelyn pressed her palms to her face. The fire popped gently in the hearth, but its warmth barely reached her. Fear churned in her stomach, but beneath it lay something stranger, trembling relief that he had spoken the truth aloud, that he had acknowledged her as herself, not as the shadow she was forced to imitate. A soft knock came. Anna slipped inside with fresh linens folded neatly in her arms. She set them down, then studied Evelyn's pale face. "He knows," Evelyn whispered, voice raw. Anna's eyes softened. "He has likely known from the beginning." Tears stung Evelyn's eyes. "Then why hasn't he cast me out?" "Perhaps because he does not want to." Anna's voice was quiet, but firm. "Mr. Drake is not an easy man, but he is fair. If he wished to condemn you, he would have done so. The fact that he has not speaks louder than suspicion." Evelyn shook her head. "I can't live like this. Every day feels like a performance I'm destined to fail." Anna stepped closer, her tone almost maternal. "Then stop performing. Give him honesty, even in small pieces. A kind truth can weigh more than a perfect lie." The words lodged deep in Evelyn's chest. The days that followed unfolded differently. Evelyn began guiding Lucien on walks through the gardens, describing the world with a painter's care, the blaze of crimson leaves, the shimmer of dew, the call of crows against the twilight sky. Lucian listened in silence, his head slightly inclined, as though memorizing each word as much as the sound of her voice. Evenings brought them back to the firelit library. She read, but he interrupted more often now. "How do you picture this place? What color is the hero's coat? What would you have done in her place?" His questions unsettled her, because they were not Charlotte's questions. They were hers. He wanted her answers. One night, after she closed the book, she found him sitting back, eyes shut, expression softened in something that looked startlingly like peace. The sight undid her. In that moment, she realized the danger wasn't just that he might uncover her lie. It was that she no longer wanted to leave, and that truth frightened her more than anything else. The storm arrived in the form of velvet heels clicking on marble. Evelyn had been arranging flowers in a tall vase in the front hall when the doors swung open and her mother swept in. Charlotte closed at her side. The two women carried the kind of presence that turned air brittle. Margaret with her sharp jaw and eyes that measured like scales. Charlotte with her perfect hair and painted smile that never reached her eyes. "Evelyn," Margaret said, her voice cool as the November wind that followed her in. Or should I say, Mrs. Drake. The way she clipped the title was less honorific than accusation. Evelyn's hands tightened around the vase. "Mother, Charlotte." Charlotte's gaze flicked up and down, assessing her sister as though she were an ill-tailored garment. "You've grown comfortable, haven't you?" she said, lips curling, "walking these halls as though they belonged to you, wearing dresses bought with his fortune, playing a role you were never meant to play." Evelyn swallowed. "I only did what you asked me to do. What we forced you to do," Charlotte corrected, stepping closer, her perfume thick, suffocating. "Don't mistake duty for privilege." Margaret removed her gloves with crisp, angry snaps. "I warned you, Evelyn. This arrangement is fragile. Lucian Drake is not a man to be trifled with. One mistake, one slip, and everything we built collapses. Do you understand what is at stake?" Evelyn forced herself to meet her mother's stare. "Yes, but I know," Margaret cut in, her tone sharp as glass. "There is no room for hesitation. You are Charlotte. You speak as Charlotte. You remember what we told you about the gala, the necklace, the garden party. If you falter, if he suspects, then all is lost." Charlotte's laughter was brittle. "And when he finally sees Evelyn, what then? He will discard you like the pale imitation you are." Evelyn flinched, heat rising in her cheeks. She had heard these words before: substitute, shadow. But this time, something in her rebelled. "I am not a pale imitation," she said softly. Then louder, her voice trembling but firm. "I may not be you, Charlotte, but I have treated him with kindness. I have cared for him when you would not. He deserves that. He deserves more than a marriage built on ambition and cruelty." Charlotte's eyes widened, disbelief flashing across her perfect mask. "You dare lecture me?" Margaret's voice dropped, deadly. "Evelyn, remember your place." For a moment, the hall held only the pounding of Evelyn's heart. Her hands shook, but she did not look away. "My place," she said quietly, "is not to deceive him forever. If you expect me to keep playing Charlotte while you live freely, you are wrong. He deserves to be loved honestly, not bargained with like property." The silence that followed was razor-thin dot from the shadowed archway beyond the staircase. Lucian Drake's voice cut through like steel wrapped in velvet. "I couldn't agree more." All three women turned. Lucian stood at the edge of the hall, his cane tapping lightly against the floor, his sightless eyes fixed in their direction. Though his gaze revealed nothing, his presence silenced every protest. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. She hadn't heard him approach. She didn't know how much he had heard. "Mr. Drake," Margaret began smoothly, recovering with the skill of a seasoned manipulator. "We were simply discussing my wife," Lucian finished, his tone polite but edged. He stepped forward, slow and assured, each tap of his cane echoing like judgment. "I make it a habit to listen closely. It helps when one cannot see." Charlotte faltered, color draining from her cheeks. "We only meant," Lucian lifted a hand, silencing her. "I know what you meant." His head inclined slightly toward Evelyn, though his expression remained unreadable. "And I know what she meant." Evelyn's knees trembled. She wanted to flee, to vanish into the stone floor. But Lucian's presence pinned her in place. He turned his face toward Margaret. "Mrs. Hartman, Charlotte, if you have business here, finish it quickly. Otherwise, this house is not your stage." Margaret stiffened, bristling at the dismissal, but she recognized the futility in pressing further. With a clipped nod, she gathered her gloves. "Come, Charlotte. We are not welcome." Charlotte lingered a moment, her eyes narrowing at Evelyn. A silent threat passed between sisters. Then, with a sharp turn of her heel, she followed their mother out. The doors closed, leaving Evelyn alone with Lucian in the vast silence of the hall. Her breath came shallow, her pulse erratic. She waited for his words, for condemnation, for accusation. But Lucian said nothing. He only stood, still and composed, his face unreadable. At last, he murmured, almost to himself, "Kindness is not a role one can fake." Evelyn's heart lurched. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words formed. Lucian tapped his cane once, the sound crisp against marble. "We will talk later." And with that, he turned, disappearing down the corridor, leaving Evelyn trembling in the echo of his words. The house settled into silence after the heavy doors closed behind Margaret and Charlotte. The echo of their heels still lingered in Evelyn's ears, each step a reminder of the confrontation that had unfolded moments ago. She stood frozen in the foyer, the vase of flowers trembling in her grip until she set it back onto the table. With shaking hands, her chest rose and fell unevenly. Never before had she spoken back to her mother with such defiance, nor challenged Charlotte so openly. It felt reckless, dangerous even, but strangely liberating. Yet beneath that fragile surge of courage lay dread. Lucian had hurt her. How much? She didn't know. Enough to question, enough to suspect. Evelyn turned, hoping to retreat to the safety of her chambers, when she noticed Anna standing at the edge of the hall. The housekeeper, silver-haired and steady, had witnessed everything. Her gaze was not sharp with judgment, but softened by something closer to sympathy. "Mrs. Drake," Anna said quietly, her tone carrying neither accusation nor mockery. She inclined her head, a gesture of respect Evelyn had not grown used to. Evelyn's throat tightened. "You needn't explain," Anna interrupted gently. "I've served this household for 20 years. I've seen ambition wear many faces, and I have seen kindness too, though rarely within these walls." She stepped forward, her eyes kind. "You are not like the sister." The words startled Evelyn, though they came as no surprise. Still, to hear them spoken aloud felt dangerous. She pressed her palms together, as though the gesture might steady her. "You know," Anna gave a small, knowing smile, "I am old, not blind, and Mr. Drake, he is blind, not unknowing. Do you understand?" Evelyn's lips parted, but no words came. Anna laid a hand on her arm, a motherly gesture Evelyn had almost forgotten the comfort of. "Do not fear. Truth reveals itself without needing to be shouted. What matters is not who you pretend to be, but how you choose to live here, now." He sees more than most with perfect sight. The reassurance was a balm, though it did not erase the fear curling inside her. Evelyn nodded faintly, whispering, "Thank you." Anna withdrew, resuming her composed air. "Now, the dining room awaits." Mr. Drake dislikes delays. Evelyn forced her feet to move, each step heavy, as she entered the dining room once more. The long table gleamed under a chandelier, silverware catching the light like daggers. Lucian sat at the head, his posture impeccable, his expression as inscrutable as ever. He turned his head slightly at her entrance, his sightless eyes trained on the sound of her footsteps. "You hesitated." Evelyn stopped short, her hands curling into her skirts. I asked Anna to prepare dinner for 7, Lucian continued calmly, "yet it is nearly past. Time stretches differently when one waits." "I'm sorry," she murmured, lowering her gaze. Silence lingered, punctuated only by the soft clink of Anna setting dishes before them. Evelyn sat across, her appetite absent, nerves tying her into knots. Lucian's voice broke the quiet, smooth but edged. "Your mother has a sharp tongue. Your sister sharper still. Yet your reply was neither timid nor cruel." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "That is not like Charlotte." Evelyn's breath caught, her pulse drummed in her ears. He lifted a glass of wine, fingers brushing the rim before setting it back down untouched. "Charlotte always wielded words like weapons, but your words trembled, then steadied, as though you fought for something, rather than against it." His lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "It is curious." Evelyn gripped the edge of the table, desperate to hold her composure. Perhaps people change. Perhaps, Lucien murmured. He leaned back in his chair, face angled toward her, though his eyes remained vacant. But change leaves traces, scars, shifts in tone, a scent unfamiliar. His fingers tapped the table once. I notice. Her heart sank. Each sentence tightened the noose around her disguise. She wanted to confess, to end the charade, but the memory of her mother's warning still echoed. One mistake, one slip, and everything collapses. Lucien's words fell softer, but they carried weight. I do not need eyes to recognize a lie. And yet, he trailed off, as though savoring the silence. Not all lies are meant to harm. The ambiguity left Evelyn reeling. Was it a threat? A mercy? She couldn't tell. Dinner continued in near silence. Lucien ate slowly, deliberately, each motion precise. Evelyn barely touched her plate. Her stomach nodded. Anna moved about quietly, a ghost of reassurance in the corner of her vision. When at last Lucien rose, cane in hand, he said only, "We will speak again. For now, rest." Evelyn stood as well, bowing her head. "Good night." He turned toward the doorway, pausing just long enough for his final words to reach her. "Kindness cannot be counterfeited, Evelyn. Remember that." Her name on his lips nearly undid her. He had never spoken it before, not once since the wedding. Her breath faltered, but by the time she lifted her eyes, he was gone. Anna approached softly, touching her shoulder. "He knows more than he says, perhaps more than even you realize." Evelyn closed her eyes, exhaustion and fear weighing her down. But somewhere beneath, a fragile flame of defiance flickered, small, uncertain, but alive. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, what if he already knows? What if he has known all along, and has chosen her anyway? The thought both terrified and warmed her. She carried it with her as she climbed the stairs, the candlelight quivering against the walls, shadows stretching long behind her. The late afternoon sun stretched long ribbons of gold across the stone terrace, softening the harsh edges of the Drake estate. Evelyn sat in a wicker chair beneath the overhang, her fingers curled around a porcelain teacup gone cool. The garden below smelled faintly of roses, though autumn's chill clung stubbornly to the air. Lucien sat opposite her, not with his usual rigid posture at the head of a grand table, but with a kind of uncharacteristic ease. His cane rested against the arm of his chair. The fading light caught on the sharp planes of his face, rendering him almost statuesque, though his eyes clouded and distant remained, a reminder of the world he could not see. For a long time, silence stretched between them, not hostile, not even awkward, but layered, as though both weighed words before speaking. Evelyn glanced at him from time to time, wondering if he could sense how tightly she clutched her teacup. How restless her heart felt in moments like these. It was Lucien who finally broke the stillness. His voice, low and steady, slipped into the quiet like a blade through silk. "Do you ever wish you were someone else?" The question caught her unprepared. Evelyn's breath hitched, and she lowered her gaze to the surface of her tea. "Every day," she whispered before she could stop herself. Lucien inclined his head slightly, as though studying the cadence of her words. "And why is that?" She hesitated. To admit too much was to risk everything, and yet something in his tone, unflinching but not unkind, urged her forward. "Because it is exhausting to carry a life that was never meant to be yours, to step into shoes that don't fit, to wear a name that feels like a costume." She paused, fingers tightening around the porcelain. "Sometimes I wonder if I even exist outside of what others expect." The confession hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. Evelyn bit her lip, heart hammering. Lucien leaned back, his expression unreadable. "I thought as much." Her eyes darted up, startled. "What do you mean?" He turned his face toward the garden, as though his sightless gaze could pierce the roses and the gathering dusk. People who are content rarely ask themselves who they might be instead. Discontent has a sound, you know? It threads through a voice, colors a silence, lingers in the way a person exhales. You wear it around you like a second skin. Evelyn swallowed hard, heat crawling up her throat. You make it sound as though I'm transparent. Lucian's lips curved faintly, though the smile was fleeting. Not transparent, merely distinct. You're not like others who drift into this house and out again, rehearsed and polished. There is a rawness to you, honest, even when you think you are deceiving me. The words unsettled her, not for their sharpness, but for their uncanny accuracy. Evelyn turned her gaze to the garden, afraid of what he might read if she looked at him too long. The silence returned, heavier now, yet not suffocating. It felt like a suspended bridge between them, fragile but present. After some time, Lucian exhaled slowly. There is something I must tell you. Evelyn's stomach tightened. What is it? He rested his hand on the cane, fingertips brushing the carved wood. I have been in contact with physicians in Switzerland, specialists. They believe there is a chance, but real that surgery could restore my sight. The words struck Evelyn like a stone cast into still water. Her cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down with unsteady hands. You mean, you might see again? Yes, Lucian replied simply. His voice carried neither triumph nor fear, only calm determination. The procedure is scheduled for winter. If successful, I may open my eyes and see a world that has been denied me for years. Evelyn's heart raced, but not with the joy she expected. Fear, sharp and merciless, surged instead. If he could see if he looked at her and found Evelyn instead of Charlotte, what then? Would he recoil, regret every moment, strip her of the fragile belonging she had begun to feel in this house? She pressed her palms to her knees, hiding the tremor. That's remarkable, she managed, though her voice betrayed her unease. Lucian tilted his head, sensing it at once. You do not sound pleased. I am, she insisted quickly, too quickly. It's only change is frightening. For anyone. Change reveals truth, Lucian said softly, his tone more observation than argument. The question is whether truth destroys or redeems. Evelyn stared at the fading sun, its light slipping behind the horizon. The thought of him opening his eyes and finally seeing her filled her with equal parts longing and terror. To be known fully and without disguise was what she had always wanted and what she feared most. Lucian rose slowly, retrieving his cane. The evening grows cold. We should go inside. Evelyn stood as well, her knees unsteady. He extended a hand not blindly, but with startling accuracy to guide her toward the door. She hesitated, then placed her fingers lightly in his palm. His hand closed gently around hers, warm and steady. For an instant, the world shrank to that single touch. Evelyn's fears pressed heavy in her chest, but beneath them flickered a fragile spark of hope. As they stepped back into the house, she thought, when the time comes, will he still choose me? The days that followed the conversation on the terrace unfolded in a haze of contradiction. Evelyn moved through the halls of the Drake estate, as though each step pressed deeper into shifting sand, half buoyed by hope, half dragged down by dread. Lucian had not mentioned Switzerland again, at least not directly, but the words lingered in her mind like a haunting refrain. He may see again. The idea glimmered like light on water, beautiful, blinding, and impossible to grasp without fear of drowning. At breakfast, she found herself studying his face, wondering what it would be like when those eyes, once shrouded, opened with sight. Would he notice the shape of her smile, the uneven curl of hair that never quite behaved, the faint scar along her wrist from childhood? Would recognition dawn only to be followed by disappointment? One morning, as the autumn rain drummed steady against the windows, Lucian requested something unusual. He was seated in the library, surrounded by shelves that rose like cathedral walls, when he spoke. "Read to me," he said simply, his hand resting on the closed cover of a worn volume. Evelyn hesitated, fingertips brushing the gilt-edged pages. "What would you like me to read?" "Anything," he replied, tilting his head slightly toward her. "It's not the words that matter, but the voice that carries them." Her throat tightened, but she obliged. She opened the book, an anthology of poetry, and began. The verses spilled into the dim room, her voice low. Weaving through the steady patter of rain, Lucian sat with eyes closed, face angled toward her, listening with an intensity that unsettled her. His hand tapped lightly against the armrest, in rhythm with her cadence, as though he were storing each syllable deep within. When she paused, he asked quietly, "Do you know why I prefer poetry?" Evelyn shook her head, forgetting he could not see the gesture. "Why?" "Because it speaks in fragments," he said. "Incomplete, imperfect, yet somehow true, like people. We are never whole, never flawless. We are verses, not novels." The remark pierced her. "And what happens when someone reads the wrong verse, pretends it belongs to them?" Lucian's lips curved faintly, though his expression remained distant. "If the voice is sincere, even a borrowed verse becomes its own truth." Her hands trembled against the book, and she quickly lowered her gaze, hiding the turmoil on her face. Later that evening, they dined together in near silence, though it no longer felt oppressive. There was a strange comfort in the quiet, as though the absence of words carried its own kind of intimacy. At one point, Lucian set down his fork and asked, almost casually, "What frightens you most, Evelyn?" Her name again. Each time he spoke it, she felt as though a veil slipped further. She faltered. "Losing myself," she admitted finally. "Waking one day to find I've become nothing more than a shadow." Lucian nodded slowly, considering. "For me, it is the opposite. I fear the return of sight." She blinked at him, startled. "Why?" "Because," he said softly, "in darkness, one learns to trust other senses. Voices, touch, sincerity. Sight deceives. It distracts with surfaces, disguises truth with beauty or its absence. What if, when my eyes open, I lose what I have learned to perceive?" His confession struck her deeply. She had never considered that his blindness, which she had always seen as a prison, might also be a kind of clarity. She whispered, "Maybe truth is not in what we see, but in what we choose to believe." Lucian turned his face toward her, sightless eyes still, but his presence piercing. "Perhaps you are right." That night, Evelyn lay awake in her chamber, the fire dimmed to embers. Rain tapped against the glass, a relentless metronome to her restless thoughts. She replayed every word they had shared, every subtle shift in his voice. The fear clung to her, the fear of exposure, of collapse, of losing everything she had come to cherish. Yet beneath it pulsed something fragile, but undeniable, hope. Hope that, when he opened his eyes, he would not turn away. Hope that he would see not Charlotte, not a mistake, but her dot. Evelyn pressed a hand against her chest, feeling the rapid beat of her heart. "Please," she whispered into the dark, though to whom she prayed she could not say. The house slumbered around her, but sleep refused her. She lay in the quiet, caught between terror and longing, knowing that the moment of truth drew closer with every passing day. Snow drifted in gentle spirals outside the tall windows of the Zurich clinic, blanketing the city in white silence. Evelyn stood at the glass, her reflection pale against the frosted pane, watching lights shimmer faintly across the lake beyond. The world here seemed suspended, timeless, and yet her heart raced with every second that slipped closer to morning. Behind her, the hospital room was warm, painted in muted tones designed to calm, though it calmed nothing inside her. Machines hummed softly, their steady rhythm broken only by the occasional creak of the radiator. Lucian lay against the bed's raised headboard, a dark silhouette against the sterile sheets. He wore the simple hospital gown as though it were armor, his posture unbending, his composure absolute, but Evelyn could see the faint tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped idly against the blanket. "You're restless," she murmured without turning. Lucian's lips curved faintly. "And you are observant." His voice carried no fear, only a quiet steadiness that belied the enormity of what awaited him. "But tell me, are you restless as well?" Evelyn's hand brushed against the cool glass. "I don't think there's a word for what I feel." Lucian tilted his head, listening to the subtle tremor in her voice. "Then perhaps you should invent one." She turned at last, stepping toward him. The soft light cast shadows across his face, highlighting the hollows of his cheeks, the sculpted lines that time and strain had carved. He looked serene, but she knew serenity was often only a mask. "I'd call it fear," she admitted quietly, "but not for the reasons you think." Lucian's sightless eyes turned toward her, unerring as though he could see through the veil of her confession. "Not for me." "For you," she corrected softly, "but also for myself. I'm afraid of what happens after." His fingers stilled against the blanket. "After tomorrow?" "Yes." Her throat tightened. "When you open your eyes. When you see me." Silence followed, deep and consuming. The only sound was the snow brushing against the glass, the soft hum of the machines. Lucian finally spoke, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "You believe I will be disappointed." Her chest ached. "I believe you will regret." He considered her words for a long moment, then reached out a hand. She hesitated before placing hers in it, and he closed his fingers gently around hers. Firm but tender. "I have lived years without sight," he said, his thumb brushing the back of her hand. "Do you know what that teaches a man?" Evelyn shook her head, though she whispered, "What?" "That vision lies," Lucian answered. "It is a treacherous sense. It shows surfaces and conceals depths. But the ear, the hand, the heart, they do not lie. And they have told me more of you than my eyes ever could." Her breath shuddered. She wanted to believe him, desperately, but fear coiled tight inside her still, whispering of masks, of shadows, of truths unveiled too late. Lucian's grip lingered before he released her hand and leaned back once more. "Tomorrow is inevitable. Whether it brings clarity or confusion, I will face it, and so will you." Evelyn sat beside the bed, folding her hands in her lap. For a long time they said nothing, wrapped in silence that was strangely intimate. At last, Lucian broke it with an unexpected question. "Do you remember your first memory of light?" She blinked. "Of light? Yes. Not an object, not a face, just light itself." Evelyn thought back, surprised by the clarity that rose. "I was very young, maybe 4. I woke in the middle of the night, and the curtains had blown open. The moonlight spilled across the floor. I remember thinking it was like water I could step into." She smiled faintly, the memory softening her fear. "I tried to touch it, but of course I couldn't." Lucian's lips curved. "I envy that. My first memory of light was fire. A candle overturned in my father's library. The room nearly burned. Ever since, I've distrusted light it reveals. Yes, but it destroys too." Their eyes as sightless, hers full of ferment across the dim space. Evelyn whispered, "And yet tomorrow you will ask for it back." "Yes," he said quietly, "because light is not the enemy, only what we do with it." The hour grew late. Nurses drifted in and out, checking charts, adjusting equipment, but the two of them remained in their quiet orbit. Evelyn read to him again, her voice low, until she realized the book had fallen shut in her lap. Lucian had not asked her to continue. It was not the words he wanted, only the sound of her near. When the lights were dimmed for the night, Evelyn lingered by the bedside. She smoothed the blanket, though it needed no smoothing, and watched the slow rise and fall of his chest. Lucian, eyes closed, spoke into the stillness. "Whatever happens, Evelyn, do not be afraid of truth." Her throat ached with unshed tears. She whispered back, I'm more afraid of losing you than of truth itself." He did not answer, but his hand found hers beneath the blanket, and together they held on until sleep claimed him. Evelyn sat awake long into the night, listening to the snow and the sound of his breathing, wishing time could stop before dawn revealed everything. The morning came with a cruel swiftness. Evelyn woke in the narrow cot beside the hospital bed, her neck stiff, her body weighted by a sleepless night. Outside, the snow had ceased, leaving the city washed in a pale blue light. Nurses entered briskly, their voices low but efficient, preparing Lucian for surgery. He sat upright, calm in a way that unsettled her. His hands were folded neatly in his lap, his composure steady, as though he were simply preparing for a meeting rather than a procedure that might alter his life. Evelyn hovered close, her heart a storm. "Are you ready?" one of the doctors asked. Lucian tilted his head slightly, as ready as one can be when walking into the unknown. Evelyn clasped his hand impulsively. "I'll be here when you return." His grip tightened around hers for an instant, strong, deliberate. "I know." Then he released her, and in that small gesture, she felt both trust and farewell. The doors closed behind the surgical team, leaving Evelyn stranded in the waiting lounge, her body trembling with every passing minute. Time slowed to a torment. She paced the cold floor, sat and stood again, wringing her hands until her knuckles ached. Every so often, a nurse passed, but no word came. She thought of her mother's voice, one slip, and everything collapses. She thought of Charlotte's Mercue, her only a substitute, and above all, she thought of Lucian's words from the night before, "Do not be afraid of truth." When at last the surgeon emerged, Evelyn nearly stumbled toward him. "The procedure went well," he said with a reassuring nod. "We'll monitor his recovery closely. The bandages will be removed once the eyes have adjusted to light. A matter of hours, not days." Relief flooded her knees until she had to grip the chair to remain upright. Hours, only hours, until the moment she both longed for and feared. By late afternoon, Evelyn was back in Lucian's room, sitting rigid in the chair by his bed. He lay against the pillows, his eyes covered by clean white bandages, his breathing steady. He looked peaceful, though she doubted peace was what he felt. When he stirred, his hand moved slightly across the sheets. Evelyn leaned forward, catching it in hers. "I'm here." His lips curved faintly. "I know. I can hear your silence." She bit her lip, tears pricking at her eyes. Silence had always betrayed her most. As twilight deepened, the surgeon returned, carrying a tray of instruments. "Mr. Drake," he said gently, "it is time." Evelyn's pulse thundered. She wanted to run, to escape before the inevitable. Yet she stayed, rooted by something stronger than fear. The surgeon unwound the bandages with meticulous care. Layer by layer, the cloth fell away, until only Lucian's face remained bare to the dim light. His eyelids fluttered, unused to sensation. "Open them slowly," the doctor instructed. Lucian obeyed. His eyes, long clouded, flickered open. They were startlingly clear, pale gray like stone. He blinked, winced against the brightness, then focused slowly. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She had shed every pretense, every trace of Charlotte. Her hair was simply pinned, her gown plain, her face stripped of all masks. She sat exposed, raw, trembling under his gaze. Lucian's eyes adjusted, and then they found her. For a long, unbearable moment, he only looked, studying, absorbing, seeing her as she was. "You." His voice was rough, unsteady. "You are not Charlotte." The words fell like a verdict. Evelyn's world cracked open. She covered her face with trembling hands, her composure shattering. "I'm sorry," she gasped, tears spilling unchecked. "I never meant to deceive you. They forced me, Mother. Charlotte, she wouldn't come, and they said I had to. I tried to be her, but I couldn't. I'm not her. I'm no one." just a shadow. Her sobs filled the room, raw and desperate. For a long moment, Lucian did not move. Then, slowly, he swung his legs from the bed, unsteady but resolute. He crossed the space between them, guided not by cane or memory, but by will, and lowered himself before her, his hands, warm and sure, lifted hers from her tear-streaked face. His gaze met hers, directly seeing her, fully, for the first time. "I know," he said softly. Her breath stilled. "You knew. I have known for months." His lips curved in a faint, tender smile. "From the first tremor in your voice, the gentleness of your hand, the way you lingered in silence. You were never Charlotte, and I never wanted you to be." Her tears flowed harder, but now they were mixed with disbelief. "Then, why didn't you say?" "Because," he murmured, brushing a tear from her cheek, "I wanted you to stay. I wanted you as you are, not as a part to play. I loved you long before my eyes opened." Evelyn's sob caught in her throat, her heart unraveling under the weight of his words. She collapsed against him, and his arms wrapped around her. Strong and certain, in that embrace, the fear that had haunted her since the wedding dissolved. The truth had come, and it had not destroyed. It had redeemed. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft against the darkened city. But within the room, light bloomed not from lamps or chandeliers, but from the fragile, radiant certainty of love, finally spoken and finally seen. The air on the terrace lingered heavy long after their hands had met. Evelyn's heart still thundered, the echo of Lucian's words reverberating in her chest. "Only you. Always you." She carried them with her as she followed him back inside, but once the doors closed, silence wrapped around them again, fragile and uncertain. Dinner that evening was subdued. The long oak table stretched between them, adorned with silver and crystal, yet the meal remained mostly untouched. Evelyn toyed with her fork, appetite absent, while Lucian sipped from his glass, his gaze often drifting toward her. He did not press, but the weight of his earlier question lingered in the room, pulling at her like gravity. Halfway through the meal, Lucian set his fork down with quiet finality. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low, deliberate. She looked up, startled by the sound of her name spoken with such clarity. He leaned forward, his eyes catching the flicker of candlelight. "You have spoken of fear, of duty, of deception forced upon you, but you have not yet spoken of choice." Her breath caught. "Choice. Yes." His voice softened, though his gaze did not waver. "You stayed, yes? But will you remain? Not because your family demands it, not because fate trapped you, but because you wish to." Evelyn's chest tightened. She wanted to answer, but her throat closed around the words. Lucian continued, his tone steady, unwavering. "I do not ask for promises gilded with fear. I ask only this. If tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, you are still here, still in this house, still by my side, then we will begin anew. Not as Lucian Drake and Charlotte Hartman, but as Lucian and Evelyn." The name lingered in the air like a vow. Evelyn felt it settle into her bones. She lowered her gaze, fingers curling into the linen napkin. "And if I am not here?" Lucian's jaw tightened, but his answer came without hesitation. "Then I will know you chose otherwise, and I will not chain you." The words struck her like both mercy and torment. Freedom was what she had always claimed to want, yet the thought of leaving carved her hollow. Dinner ended in silence. Lucian rose, bowing his head briefly before retreating to his study. Evelyn remained at the table long after, staring at the candles as they burned low, wax pooling in silence. Later, in her chamber, she paced before the tall windows. The city stretched beyond, jeweled with lights, but her reflection in the glass looked pale, restless. She pressed her hands to the cold pane, trying to steady herself. "Why did you stay?" His voice echoed again. The truth she had confessed still terrified her, that she had come as an impostor, but remained because of him. Because in his silence, his questions, his unshakable presence, she had found something she never thought she would: belonging. She sat on the edge of her bed, fingers clutching the coverlet. Memories flooded her. The first breakfast, when he had noted her trembling voice. The evening in the library, when he asked her to read. The way he held her hand in Zurich before the surgery. His first look, when the bandages were removed. Each moment carved into her like light, into stone. Tears welled, but she did not wipe them away. Instead, she whispered into the empty room, "I want to stay. I want to stay because of you." The admission startled her, fragile yet undeniable. It was the first time she had spoken it aloud, even if only to herself. The hours stretched deep into night. She lay in bed, sleepless, watching the slow crawl of moonlight across the ceiling. Fear gnawed at her still, the fear of waking to regret, the fear of being abandoned once more. But beneath it pulsed a steadier rhythm, like the beating of her heart. Hope. She closed her eyes, breathing in the quiet, and made her choice. When dawn finally came, pale and tentative, Evelyn rose and dressed. She stepped to the window, parting the curtains, letting light spill across the room. It caught the edges of her hair, her gown, the small trembling smile that curved her lips. She was still here, and for the first time, it was because she wanted to be. The air on the terrace lingered heavy long after their hands had met. Evelyn's heart still thundered, the echo of Lucien's words reverberating in her chest. Only you. Always you. She carried them with her as she followed him back inside, but once the doors closed, silence wrapped around them again, fragile and uncertain. Dinner that evening was subdued. The long oak table stretched between them, adorned with silver and crystal. Yet the meal remained mostly untouched. Evelyn toyed with her fork, appetite absent, while Lucien sipped from his glass, his gaze often drifting toward her. He did not press, but the weight of his earlier question lingered in the room, pulling at her like gravity. Halfway through the meal, Lucien set his fork down with quiet finality. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low, deliberate. She looked up, startled by the sound of her name spoken with such clarity. He leaned forward, his eyes catching the flicker of candlelight. "You have spoken of fear, of duty, of deception forced upon you, but you have not yet spoken of choice." Her breath caught. "Choice. Yes." His voice softened, though his gaze did not waver. "You stayed, yes? But will you remain? Not because your family demands it, not because fate trapped you, but because you wish to." Evelyn's chest tightened. She wanted to answer, but her throat closed around the words. Lucien continued, his tone steady, unwavering. "I do not ask for promises gilded with fear. I ask only this: if tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, you are still here, still in this house, still by my side, then we will begin anew. Not as Lucien Drake and Charlotte Hartman, but as Lucien and Evelyn." The name lingered in the air like a vow. Evelyn felt it settle into her bones. She lowered her gaze, fingers curling into the linen napkin. "And if I am not here?" Lucien's jaw tightened, but his answer came without hesitation. "Then I will know you chose otherwise, and I will not chain you." The words struck her like both mercy and torment. Freedom was what she had always claimed to want, yet the thought of leaving carved her hollow. Dinner ended in silence. Lucien rose, bowing his head briefly before retreating to his study. Evelyn remained at the table long after, staring at the candles as they burned low, wax pooling in silence. Later, in her chamber, she paced before the tall windows. The city stretched beyond, jeweled with lights, but her reflection in the glass looked pale, restless. She pressed her hands to the cold pane, trying to steady herself. "Why did you stay?" His voice echoed again. The truth she had confessed still terrified her, that she had come as an impostor, but remained because of him. Because in his silence, his questions, his unshakable presence, She had found something she never thought she would, belonging. She sat on the edge of her bed, fingers clutching the coverlet. Memories flooded her. The first breakfast, when he had noted her trembling voice. The evening in the library, when he asked her to read. The way he held her hand in Zurich before the surgery. His first look, when the bandages were removed. Each moment carved into her like light, into stone. Tears welled, but she did not wipe them away. Instead, she whispered into the empty room, "I want to stay. I want to stay because of you." The admission startled her, fragile yet undeniable. It was the first time she had spoken it aloud, even if only to herself. The hours stretched deep into night. She lay in bed, sleepless, watching the slow crawl of moonlight across the ceiling. Fear gnawed at her still, the fear of waking to regret, the fear of being abandoned once more. But beneath it pulsed a steadier rhythm, like the beating of her heart. Hope. She closed her eyes, breathing in the quiet, and made her choice. When dawn finally came, pale and tentative, Evelyn rose and dressed. She stepped to the window, parting the curtains, letting light spill across the room. It caught the edges of her hair, her gown, the small trembling smile that curved her lips. She was still here, and for the first time, it was because she wanted to be. The first light of morning spilled across the valley, painting the hills of Oregon in shades of rose and amber. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and wood smoke, so different from the heavy perfume of New York's high-rise life. Evelyn stood on the porch of the modest lodge that now served as both home and heart of their new endeavor. Beyond the fields, the main building of the Touch of Light gleamed with fresh timber and wide windows, welcoming the day. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, watching as a group of children emerged onto the path with their canes, guided by instructors. Their laughter drifted up to her, bright and unrestrained, weaving into the rustle of the trees. Each sound was a thread in a tapestry she never thought she would belong to, a tapestry she and Lucian had helped create. Behind her, the door opened, and Lucian stepped onto the porch. He wore a simple sweater, his hair slightly mussed from sleep, his gray eyes clear as the dawn. The sight of him still stole her breath, not because of his wealth, nor his power, but because of the steadiness he carried, steadiness she had once thought she could never deserve. "You're awake early," he remarked, his voice still husky. "So are you," she replied, smiling faintly. He moved beside her, resting his hand lightly against the railing. His gaze swept over the grounds, watching the children find their way with steady steps. "Do you hear it?" he asked. "Hear what?" "The sound of belonging," he said softly. "It's louder than I expected." Evelyn's throat tightened, warmth rising in her chest. She slipped her hand into his, their fingers interlacing with a natural ease. "It's because you built this for them." "No," Lucian corrected gently, turning his eyes toward her. "Because we built this." The words settled into her like sunlight through glass. She remembered the night in New York, when she had chosen to stay, when fear had nearly driven her away. She remembered Zurich, his first sight of her, the truth she had confessed through tears. Those moments felt like lifetimes ago, yet they were etched into the foundation of what they now shared, as they stood together. Anna, the housekeeper who had followed them, west appeared at the door, a basket of warm bread in her arms. "Breakfast is ready," she said with her usual gentle briskness, but her eyes softened as she looked at them, the way one looks at something fragile finally healed. "Thank you, Anna," Evelyn said warmly. Lucian gave a small nod, his hand still firmly clasping Evelyn's. When Anna disappeared inside, he turned back to her. "Do you ever regret it?" She tilted her head. "Regret what?" "Choosing me," he said simply. Evelyn's smile trembled, but held. "Every day I regret not choosing sooner." Lucian's lips curved, and for a moment, the gravity that had once defined him melted into quiet joy. He lifted her hand, brushing his lips against her knuckles, a gesture both reverent and intimate. The bell at the main building rang, calling the children to their morning lessons. Evelyn watched as they filed inside, guided by instructors who spoke with patience and kindness. Some carried sketchbooks, others instruments, all clutching the promise of futures once denied to them. She leaned against Lucien's shoulder. "Do you think they'll remember us?" He turned slightly, his gaze tracing the path of the children. "Not as benefactors, but as proof that even in darkness, there is light worth reaching for. That is enough." The wind carried the faintest chill, but Evelyn felt only warmth. For years, she had been told she was a shadow, a substitute, a woman meant to vanish into the background of her sister's brilliance. Yet here, with him, she was no shadow. She was the flame itself. The sun rose higher, gilding the valley in gold. Lucien squeezed her hand once more, firm and sure. "Come," he said. "Let's greet the day." Together they descended the steps of the porch, walking hand in hand toward the main building, where laughter and possibility waited. For the first time in her life, Evelyn did not fear what lay ahead. She belonged not because she was chosen by circumstance, but because she had chosen herself, and him, and this life they now shared. Charlotte Hartman, not Drake anymore, for she had taken another name, moved through the marble halls of her Washington townhouse with the grace of a woman who had everything. At least, that was what the papers said. They called her fortunate, envied her gowns and jewels, photographed her hand looped elegantly through the arm of her husband, Senator William Stratton. It had been the match of the season, the brilliant senator with eyes on higher office, and the dazzling daughter of a prominent family. Their wedding splashed across every society column, a picture of triumph. Charlotte had smiled for the cameras, her hand perfectly placed, her gaze sharp as diamonds. She told herself she had won, that Evelyn's quiet retreat to obscurity meant nothing compared to her ascendancy. But victory tasted hollow in the vast townhouse. Gilded and echoing, William's affection was reserved for audiences. His words to her were courteous, measured, but never tender. He spent long nights in the Senate, or at dinners, where speeches replaced intimacy. Charlotte dined alone more often than not, staring at chandeliers that glittered coldly overhead. Still, she told herself she had chosen correctly. Power was a steadier companion than love. Then the accident came. It was sudden, a late-night drive back from a fundraiser. Rain slick on the streets, a car swerving where it shouldn't. Charlotte remembered the scream of brakes, the shattering glass, the hospital's white walls. When William awoke, his eyes were bandaged. The doctors spoke in measured tones. Damage irreparable, sight unlikely to return. Charlotte sat at his bedside, her manicured hands clenched tight. She thought of Lucien, then of his steady cane, his unflinching composure, the quiet strength she had once mocked. And now fate had given her a mirror she could not bear. William returned home weeks later, a changed man. His pride so much like Lucien's wrestled with dependence. He stumbled, cursed, lashed out. Charlotte became his unwilling guide, her arms stiff as she led him through the house, her voice clipped as she described rooms she no longer wanted to inhabit. "You must be patient," she said once, though her tone carried no patience at all. "I did not marry patience," William snapped. "I married presence." The words struck her, though she disguised the wound with a cold smile. Presence, he called it. A mask at galas, a hand at photo ops. That was all she had ever been to him, and all he had ever been to her. Yet now, in darkness, he demanded more. Each day became a battle. She brought meals he hardly touched, read speeches aloud that he criticized, endured nights of silence that suffocated. The townhouse, once her stage, had become a prison. One evening, as she guided William to the study, he stumbled, gripping her arm tighter. "Slow down," he barked. Charlotte's temper flared. "I am not your nurse." "No," he said bitterly, sinking into the chair. "You are not. The words lingered long after she left him in the study's dark. She climbed the staircase alone, her reflection fractured in the gilt mirrors. For the first time, she wondered if Evelyn, little, quiet Evelyn, had chosen better. Miles away, in Oregon, another life thrived. The touch of light center bustled with energy. Children painted with bold strokes, their fingers tracing color they could not see, but could feel. Musicians learned to play by vibration, dancers by rhythm. Evelyn moved among them with calm encouragement, her presence a balm. She knelt beside a boy struggling with his cane, guiding his steps with patience born of love. Lucian watched from the doorway, his heart swelling with pride. He no longer needed to question why she had stayed. Her every gesture answered him. In her, he saw the truth of love, not spectacle, not transaction, but the quiet constancy of presence. That evening, they walked the grounds together, the valley bathed in twilight. Evelyn carried a lantern, its glow soft against the encroaching dark. "Do you ever think of her?" she asked, her voice careful. Lucian knew whom she meant. Sometimes, he admitted, but not with regret, only with gratitude. "Without Charlotte's choices, I might never have found you." Evelyn lowered her gaze, touched by the honesty in his words. "She would not see you as you are now," she murmured. Lucian smiled faintly. "Then it is her loss. I have already seen enough for both of us." They paused beneath the budding stars, their hands entwined, the lantern between them casting halos of light. Back in Washington, Charlotte sat in a parlor filled with silence, her husband dozing restlessly by the fire. The papers no longer called her fortunate. Whispers spoke, instead of tragedy, of a senator's fading star. She stared into the flames, her reflection wavering in the glass, and for the first time she wondered if the darkness around her was not William's affliction but her own. In Oregon, laughter rang from the lodge as children finished their evening lessons. Evelyn leaned against Lucian's shoulder, the lantern dimming as night gathered. One woman, bound in chains of her own ambition, sat in a house of silence she had built herself. Another, once called a substitute, stood in a valley of light, her heart unburdened at last. The contrast was stark, undeniable, one lost in the very shadows she had feared, the other reborn in the radiance of love, chosen freely. And so the story closed, not with triumphs, measured in wealth or titles, but with the quiet victory of two souls who had chosen truth over deception, light over darkness, and each other over all.